And we are officially live on air with Christian Picciolini, which is the Italian pronunciation for his surname, or his last name, as you would say in the US. And you are a very interesting guy, not just because of all the wonderful things that you do, but clearly you have a very interesting past, and how you got to where you are now from where you were are complete opposites. And I'm interested in the process. I'm interested in the context. There are a lot of things that I'm very curious about. So I want to start off at the beginning. Tell me about your childhood, where you grew up, what kind of education did you have, and maybe mention your family and how they felt about life in general. Wow. So, and did you have any siblings?
I had a brother who was 10 years younger than me, and actually he was very important in my life in many ways. When I was younger, before I joined this movement, he was my best friend. He was kind of what I lived my life for, because I didn't have a lot of friends.
Wow. So let's go to the actual movement itself. You're 14 years old. You get recruited by one of the most prominent supremacists out there. They obviously invited you in with open arms. How did you feel about what was going on within, and what sort of activities did they get you involved in that you'd be happy to talk about?
Sure. No, I mean, at first it started out as just hanging around, just being one of the crowd and being their gopher to buy them cigarettes and beer back when a 14-year-old could still do that without, being questioned about it. And then it turned into indoctrination. It turned into propaganda and learning the rhetoric, the recruitment techniques. I recognized at a very young age that music had a very powerful influence to bring people together. So I started one of America's first white power skinhead bands. And I started to record albums that were filled with instructions. Lyrics were propaganda, they were education, but they were also intentionally made to incite people towards violence against the enemy. And in fact, I was in the first American band to leave the U.S. and play a concert overseas in Germany. And we played to 4,000 skinheads from all over Europe,
Wow.
who then went out into the town, this beautiful town of Weimar, which was a part of old East Germany, that produced many philosophers and artists and creatives and thinkers. And they went out into this town after I sang my words to them, and they nearly destroyed it. They broke into stores, they stole beer, they beat up the townspeople, who, by the way, happened to be white Germans. And I started to realize that my words had consequences. And that was one of the first turning points for me in understanding the responsibility that I had.
You sit in a situation where you're the leader of a band. You're quite prominent within the white power movement. Dare I even say that you have leadership role within the local chapter, or even from an international point of view? You're earning respect, you're getting the power that you're looking for. And of course, you might be involved with a little bit of chaos and mayhem. But of course, some people were getting hurt along the way,
Sure.
Some quite seriously. How did you reconcile that with, where you were within the movement?
It was a trade-off of power for me. It was very ego-driven and selfish. I hurt a lot of people, not just my enemies, but, I planted a lot of seeds of hate in those days, 30 years ago, that I'm still pulling out the weeds from today. People who I brought into my organization who ended up dead or in prison, or, in some regards it destroyed their relationships or their lives. I feel very responsible for that. I even feel responsible for the people that maybe I've indirectly affected, like the Dylan Ruths of the world, who walk into a church in South Carolina and murder 9 innocent people based on the color of their skin. And it's why I do what I do today, 22 years after I've left this movement. I recognize that I'm one of the only people on earth who has this perspective, has this experience, who now can use that experience to help other people better their lives and distance themselves from something that I know very, very clearly, because I was a member of, is destructive, is not about love. It is purely about hate and division. And that's what I've committed my life to doing. How do I reconcile it? And that's through the work that I do every day. I try to leave a more positive footprint than the one that I left 22 years ago.
I mean, how long did that process take for you to start to get to know your neighbor, so to speak?
You know, it was probably over the course of a year, but these were people that I'd never engaged with in a meaningful way before. I'd never had meaningful dialogues with African Americans or with gay people or with Jewish people. They were just people that I hated, people that I saw as monsters or destroying, something that I held dear. But when I began to meet them, it suddenly crushed this idea that I had in my head of who they were. They were suddenly humans, and we had more similarities than differences.
How did it make you feel about the movement that had made you feel that way?
Oh, it made me resented very much because at that point I felt like I had been fooled, and I felt guilty for having fooled other people. I felt a lot of shame for the things that I did against people who I now called friends. It's what I do. It's why I do what I do now, 22 years later, where I'm helping to try and understand the movement and also to dismantle what I helped build so many decades ago.
Do you think there's potential for people within that movement to allow love to enter through little cracks and actually change an ideology? I mean, not certainly overnight, but is there potential for you to find key players and show them what you've experienced? Because, like we said, ignorance is bliss. This is where the real problem comes in. When it comes to peace between different countries, most of the time, they don't know each other. They just know what they say about each other. And is there a way, do you feel that there's a chance that maybe the movement could be tackled from within?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, that's what I do every day. Maybe not from within, but we receive requests from people and from people who are bystanders, family members who care about sons, daughters, wives, coworkers who are going down this path and want to help. And in fact, we've created a network of over 100 people just in the last few years who are formers, just like me, who now are committed to not only supporting each other, but committed to helping other people who live the same types of lives that they did. I know that it works. I've seen it happen time and time again. It's an evidence-based process where we've actually helped people disengage from their ideology, funny enough, not by engaging with ideology, but by trying to fill those potholes.
Okay, we're gonna ask the question. Hello, was there a turning point when you stopped hating? What was the turning point for you?
I think it was it was a series of events. It started when my son was born and my priorities changed. The love started to push out all the hate, but also, really connecting with the people that I thought I hated because I'd never known them before. It was easy to say I hated blacks or Jews or immigrants or Latinos, but I didn't know any. I never talked to anybody. It was a fear instead of a hate. And when I began to build those bridges and understand the people that I hated, I recognized they were more human than I was, that we had more in common than we had differences. So those were really the turning points, is the compassion I received from other people when I didn't deserve it.
Do you think that you would only be where you are now because of your experience, or do you think that you might have naturally navigated towards producing video, well, obviously not on the same content, but in that field?
I definitely owe some of my success now to my past, because I wouldn't have founded this organization and been able to reach people if I hadn't had that experience. But I was always creative. I used to sit when I was a little boy and draw pictures of the Peanuts characters like Snoopy and Charlie Brown, and then sell them for a quarter a piece. So there was always a creative bug or a fire inside of me. So I don't know where I would have gone. When I was a young boy, I wanted to be an architect or a soccer player. So who knows, maybe I could have been one of those as well.
What sort of advice would you give young people today, the marginalized youth who are generally the you back in the day, that are so easily influenced? And now you say with social media and fake news, sometimes they can't help being drawn into it. Now the algorithms are drawing them in. What advice would you give them?
It's very difficult. And actually, this is my next book. My next book is called A Constant Gardener, which is really a series of essays and letters from me to my former 14-year-old self. Just giving that person a little bit of advice on what I would encounter. I think the biggest thing is be passionate. Identify passion, and then work to try and build on that passion. And know that there's a difference between obsession and passion. Obsession is a negative connotation. If we become obsessed with something, it's driven by ego. When we become passionate about something, it's driven, by your being. I would also say to question all the answers, because there's so much information available today that it's so hard to distinguish what's real news, what's fake news, what's propaganda, what's parody. And we need to develop our sense of critical thinking better, because while in the past it was generally acceptable to get our information from a trusted source and believe it, well, now there's so many players and so many people with agendas that are trying to push a very narrow perspective, that we really need to be able to question what it is that we're seeing, hearing, and being told. And as a young person, we're the most susceptible because we generally don't have the life experience that adults do. So in order to build the world that you want, create your own narrative, because if you don't, somebody will create that narrative for you.
Does life character hate deal only with races, or also other kind of prejudice or hate?
Very good. Very good. We deal with all different kinds of hate or hateful ideologies: racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-immigrant. Anytime that somebody is against somebody else for an ideological reason, those are the types of people we want to help.
What is if you, for example, are an alcoholic and you are addicted to a substance, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever it may be, and you go to rehabilitation and you've been on the wagon for 20 years, 30 years, is there a chance that you could ever relapse and move back into the movement? If it was appealing enough for you, and maybe you hit hard times over the next couple of years, is there a chance that you might go back?
There's always that fear of recidivism if the circumstances with that person changes. Our goal is to connect them to humanity and provide them a new community once they leave their old community, so that they're not wallowing by themselves. And what we see is when people transition from one community to another, our success rate is through the roof. Where we don't provide that community for people and just kind of leave them to their own vices, they tend to go back because it's easier to go back, even if they're questioning their ideology, than it is to start over. Of course, if situations drastically change in a person's life, or if mental illness is playing a part, there's always the chance that somebody could revert back to their old habits. But our goal is to make sure that we always surround them with positive influence. As long as they want to be a part, so that we can question those narratives when they come in.